You know what keeps me up at night? It's not the silver price charts. It's not the industrial demand numbers. It's walking through a hospital and realizing that every single wound dressing, every catheter coating, every surgical instrument in that building depends on a metal that's disappearing from global markets at an alarming rate. And nobody's talking about it. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening right now, in real time, while everyone's distracted by gold hitting new highs and Bitcoin making headlines. There's a crisis brewing in the medical sector that's going to reshape not just healthcare, but the entire precious metals market. And if you understand what's coming, you're going to see why silver isn't just an investment anymore. It's becoming a strategic resource that governments and institutions are quietly hoarding. Here's what triggered my deep dive into this. 3 weeks ago, a major hospital supply chain manager reached out to me. She's been in the business for 23 years, never panicked about anything. But she told me something that made my blood run cold. Her hospital network, which serves over 2 million patients across the Midwest, just got notification that their primary supplier of silver-based wound dressings is implementing allocation protocols. Not price increases. Allocation. As in, we can't guarantee you'll get what you need. That's not a supply hiccup. That's the beginning of a shortage. Now, before you think this is just about Band-Aids and gauze, let me show you exactly how deep silver's integration into modern medicine really goes. Because once you see this, you'll understand why the medical sector alone could absorb the entire global silver surplus and still be screaming for more. Silver's antimicrobial properties have been known for thousands of years. Ancient civilizations used silver vessels to keep water pure. But what's happening now is completely different. We're not talking about folk remedies. We're talking about silver nanoparticles engineered at the molecular level, embedded into medical devices that are literally keeping people alive. The global antimicrobial barrier silver dressing market was valued at $1.5 billion in 2025. That's just wound dressings, one category, and it's projected to hit $2.5 billion by 2030. But here's where it gets interesting. That growth projection was made before anyone factored in the antibiotic resistance crisis that's exploding across global healthcare systems. Right now, as I'm recording this, antibiotic-resistant infections kill over 1.2 million people every year. That number is accelerating. And you know what doesn't develop resistance? Silver. Bacteria can't adapt to silver's antimicrobial mechanism because it attacks them on multiple fronts simultaneously. It disrupts their cell membranes, interferes with their DNA replication, and generates reactive oxygen species that essentially shred them from the inside out. This is why healthcare applications now represent 34.9% of the entire silver nanoparticles market. Not jewelry, not coins, medical applications. And that percentage is climbing every single quarter. Let me break down exactly where this silver is going, because the scope is staggering. Start with wound care. Every major burn unit in America uses silver-impregnated dressings. They're the gold standard for preventing infection in severe burns, surgical wounds, diabetic ulcers, and pressure sores. A single severe burn patient can go through hundreds of these dressings during treatment. Now multiply that by the millions of patients worldwide who need advanced wound care, and you start to see the scale. Then there's the catheter market. Urinary catheters, central venous catheters, dialysis catheters. Every single one of them is now being manufactured with silver coatings to prevent catheter-associated infections, which are one of the most common and deadly hospital-acquired infections. The global market for antimicrobial catheters is exploding because hospitals are under massive pressure to reduce infection rates. Insurance companies won't reimburse for hospital-acquired infections anymore. So hospitals have no choice. They have to use silver-coated devices. But wait, there's more. Surgical instruments, implantable devices, bone cement used in joint replacements, water purification systems in hospitals, air filtration systems in operating rooms, even the fabric in surgical gowns and drapes. Silver is being integrated into every possible surface and device where infection control matters. And here's the kicker. This isn't optional anymore. This is becoming regulatory standard. The FDA and European medical device regulators are increasingly requiring antimicrobial properties in medical devices, which means silver isn't a premium option. It's becoming mandatory. Now, let's talk about the supply side of this equation, because this is where the story gets really concerning. Global silver production has been essentially flat for the past 5 years. We're mining about 825 million ounces per year. That number isn't growing. In fact, many analysts believe we've hit peak silver production. The easy deposits are gone, the ore grades are declining, and opening new silver mines takes 7 to 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars in capital investment. Meanwhile, industrial demand for silver is hitting all-time highs. Solar panels alone consumed 140 million ounces in 2024. Electric vehicles use twice as much silver as traditional cars. 5G infrastructure build-out requires massive amounts of silver for its superior conductivity. And now, on top of all that, you've got medical applications growing at double-digit rates. The Silver Institute's latest data shows we're running a supply deficit of over 200 million ounces per year. That means demand exceeds new mine supply by almost 25%. Where's that deficit being filled from? Above-ground stockpiles. Recycling. And here's the critical point. Medical silver doesn't get recycled. Once it's used in a wound dressing or a catheter, it's contaminated medical waste. It's gone forever. This is completely different from industrial applications like electronics, where silver can be recovered and recycled. Medical silver is a one-way consumption stream, and it's growing faster than any other category. Let me give you a specific example of how this is playing out. There's a company called Smith & Nephew, one of the world's largest medical device manufacturers. They produce a silver-based wound dressing called Acticoat. It's used in burn units globally. In their last earnings call, they mentioned they're having difficulty securing consistent silver supply for their manufacturing facilities. This is a multi-billion-dollar company with long-term supply contracts, and they're struggling to get the raw material they need. Now, if a major player like that is having supply issues, what do you think is happening to smaller manufacturers? What's happening to hospitals in developing countries? What's happening to the entire supply chain when the fundamental commodity is in structural deficit? Here's where this connects to something bigger. Remember when COVID hit and we had PPE shortages? Masks, gowns, gloves. That was a temporary supply chain disruption. This is different. This is a permanent supply-demand imbalance in a critical medical resource. And unlike PPE, you can't just spin up new silver production in a few months. It takes years to bring new mines online. The geopolitical implications are massive. China controls about 20% of global silver production. Mexico produces another 23%. Peru is the world's second largest producer. What happens if trade tensions escalate? What happens if these countries decide to restrict silver exports to secure their own medical supply chains? We've already seen this playbook with rare earth elements. Silver could be next. And here's something that should terrify healthcare administrators. The price of silver has been artificially suppressed for decades through paper market manipulation. But physical silver is starting to decouple from paper prices. The premium on physical silver bars and coins has exploded. Delivery delays are stretching to weeks or months, and industrial users are starting to panic buy to secure supply. When that panic spreads to the medical sector, and hospitals start stockpiling silver-based supplies because they're worried about availability, you're going to see a buying frenzy that makes the toilet paper shortage look like a minor inconvenience. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a medical supply chain consultant who works with hospital networks across North America. She told me that several large hospital systems are already building strategic reserves of silver-based medical supplies. Not because they need them right now, but because they're terrified they won't be able to get them 6 months from now. That's not normal market behavior. That's crisis preparation. And it's not just hospitals. Medical device manufacturers are doing the same thing. They're buying silver futures contracts. They're establishing direct relationships with mining companies. They're even exploring vertical integration, where they might invest in silver mining operations just to secure their own supply. This is the kind of behavior you see when sophisticated institutional players believe a critical resource is about to become scarce. And they're not wrong. Now, here's where this gets personal for anyone watching this video. If you're sitting on retirement savings, if you've got a 401k or an IRA, you need to understand that the silver story isn't just about medical applications. It's about a fundamental shift in how we value strategic resources. Silver isn't just a precious metal anymore. It's a critical industrial commodity with irreplaceable properties in multiple sectors that are all growing simultaneously. Quick aside here because this is relevant. If you've got $100,000 or more in retirement accounts, I put together a free guide on how gold IRAs work. It covers how you can get physical precious metals into your retirement account without tax penalties, and why that might make sense given what's happening in these markets. It's in the description below. Worth checking out if you're thinking about diversifying beyond traditional stocks and bonds. Anyway, back to the medical silver crisis. Because there's another layer to this that most people aren't considering. The antibiotic resistance problem isn't getting better. It's accelerating. The World Health Organization has called it one of the top 10 global public health threats. And as bacteria become resistant to more and more antibiotics, the medical community is going to lean even harder on silver-based antimicrobial solutions. There's already research being done on silver nanoparticles as a potential treatment for antibiotic-resistant infections. Not just prevention, treatment. If that research pans out, and silver-based therapies become a frontline treatment for resistant infections, the demand for medical-grade silver is going to explode beyond anything we're currently projecting. Think about what that means. We're already in a supply deficit with current demand levels. Now imagine demand doubling or tripling as silver transitions from a preventive measure to an active treatment. Where's that silver going to come from? The answer is, it's going to come from higher prices. Much higher prices, because that's the only mechanism that can balance supply and demand when you can't quickly increase production. Price has to rise until it either stimulates new supply or destroys demand. And in medical applications, demand is inelastic. Hospitals can't just decide not to use antimicrobial dressings because silver got expensive. They have to use them. Patient safety and regulatory requirements mandate it. So the price adjustment is going to be brutal and one-sided. Silver prices are going to have to rise until either new mines come online, which takes years, or until industrial applications that can substitute away from silver start doing so. But medical applications can't substitute. There's no alternative that works as well as silver. This is why smart money is starting to accumulate physical silver. Not paper silver, not silver ETFs, physical metal. Because when the shortage hits, and it's going to hit, the people holding paper claims are going to discover that there's not enough physical metal to satisfy all those claims. We've seen this movie before with gold in the 1970s. We're about to see it again with silver. Let me give you some numbers that should make this crystal clear. The entire global above-ground silver stockpile available for investment is estimated at around 2 to 3 billion ounces. Sounds like a lot, right? But here's the context. Global investment demand alone is running at around 250 million ounces per year. Industrial demand is over 600 million ounces, and medical demand is growing at 15 to 20% annually, from a base of around 50 million ounces. Do the math. At current consumption rates, and assuming no growth, which is a ridiculous assumption, we'd burn through available stockpiles in less than 4 years. But demand is growing, especially medical demand, which means the timeline is shorter. Much shorter. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. The market hasn't priced any of this in yet. Silver is still trading like it's just another commodity. But it's not. It's becoming a strategic resource with national security implications. Because if your healthcare system can't function without silver, and silver is in short supply, that's a national security issue. We're already seeing the early signs of this recognition. Several countries are starting to classify silver as a critical mineral. That's the same designation given to rare earth elements and other resources deemed essential for national security and economic stability. Once silver gets that designation globally, you're going to see export restrictions, strategic reserves, and government intervention in markets. That's not a free market anymore. That's a controlled resource. And the price dynamics in controlled resource markets are completely different from normal commodity markets. Just look at what happened with rare earths when China restricted exports. Prices went vertical. Now imagine that happening with silver, but with the added urgency of a global healthcare system that depends on it. The price spike is going to be historic. Here's another angle most people aren't considering. The green energy transition is also massively silver-intensive. Every solar panel requires about 20 grams of silver. Global solar installations are projected to triple over the next decade. That's going to consume an additional 300 million ounces of silver per year. Add that to medical demand growth, add that to electric vehicle demand, add that to 5G infrastructure, and you've got a demand profile that's completely unsustainable with current supply. Something has to give. And what's going to give is price. It has to. There's no other mechanism to balance this equation. But here's where it gets really interesting from an investment perspective. Silver is still dramatically undervalued relative to gold. The gold-to-silver ratio is currently around 85 to 1. Historically, that ratio has averaged around 60 to 1. During periods of silver shortage, it's dropped as low as 15 to 1. If we just revert to the historical average, silver prices would need to rise by about 40% relative to gold. If we get an actual shortage scenario, which is looking increasingly likely, silver could outperform gold by 3 to 5 times. That's not speculation. That's just math based on historical precedent and current supply-demand fundamentals. And unlike gold, which is primarily a monetary metal and store of value, silver has this massive industrial demand component that's completely inelastic. Gold demand can contract if prices rise too high. People can delay buying jewelry. Central banks can slow their accumulation. But industrial silver demand doesn't work that way. If you're manufacturing solar panels or medical devices, you need the silver. Period. You can't just decide not to use it because it got expensive. This is why silver has more explosive upside potential than gold in a supply crisis scenario. The demand is locked in. The supply is constrained. And the market is still pricing it like it's abundant. Let me tell you about a mining executive I spoke with last month. He runs operations for a mid-sized silver producer. He told me something that should be front-page news but isn't. He said that at current silver prices, about 30% of global silver production is barely profitable, or actually losing money. These are marginal mines that are only operating because they're hoping prices will improve. If prices don't rise soon, those mines are going to shut down. And when they do, you're going to see supply contract even further, which will accelerate the shortage. It's a vicious cycle. Low prices discourage production. Reduced production worsens the shortage. The shortage eventually forces prices higher. But there's a lag time. And during that lag time, the shortage gets worse and worse until the price spike is explosive rather than gradual. We're in that lag time right now. The shortage is building. The market hasn't recognized it yet. But it will. And when it does, the repricing is going to be violent. Here's what I think is going to happen over the next 12 to 24 months. First, you're going to see more stories about medical supply chain issues related to silver-based products. It's already starting. Those stories are going to create awareness. Second, you're going to see industrial users start competing more aggressively for available supply. That competition is going to push premiums higher on physical silver. Third, you're going to see the paper silver market start to crack as people realize there's not enough physical metal to back all the paper claims. And fourth, you're going to see a rush into physical silver that makes the 2020-2021 silver squeeze look like a minor blip. The smart money is positioning now, before the mainstream catches on. They're buying physical silver, they're taking delivery, they're storing it securely. Because they understand that in a shortage scenario, possession is everything. Paper claims are worthless if there's no metal to deliver against them. And here's the final piece of this puzzle that ties everything together. The medical silver shortage isn't happening in isolation. It's happening at the same time as a broader commodity supercycle driven by the green energy transition, deglobalization, and underinvestment in mining over the past decade. Silver sits at the intersection of all these trends. It's a green energy metal. It's a medical necessity. It's a monetary metal. And it's in structural deficit. That's a perfect storm for a price explosion. Now, I'm not saying silver is going to $10,000 an ounce next week. That's not how markets work. But I am saying that silver at current prices, given everything we've discussed, is one of the most asymmetric risk-reward opportunities in any market right now. The downside is limited, the upside is enormous, and the catalysts are already in motion. The medical silver shortage is real. It's growing, and it's going to force a repricing of silver that catches most investors completely off guard. The question isn't whether this is going to happen. The question is whether you're going to position yourself before it does, or whether you're going to be one of the people scrambling to buy silver at 3 or 4 times current prices after the shortage becomes undeniable. History shows us that resource shortages create generational wealth transfer opportunities. The people who recognize them early and position accordingly make fortunes. The people who wait until it's obvious pay premium prices and miss most of the move. Right now, today, you have the opportunity to be early. The medical silver shortage is the catalyst that's going to wake the market up to silver's true value. And once that awakening happens, there's no going back. The genie doesn't go back in the bottle. So here's my challenge to you. Don't take my word for any of this. Do your own research. Look at the supply-demand fundamentals. Talk to people in the medical supply chain. Look at what industrial users are doing. Look at the price action in physical silver versus paper silver. And then, make your own decision about whether this is an opportunity you want to participate in. But whatever you do, don't ignore this. Because the medical silver shortage isn't a maybe. It's not a possibility. It's happening right now. And it's going to reshape the precious metals market in ways that most people can't even imagine yet. The question is, are you going to be positioned for it? Or are you going to watch it happen from the sidelines?